You've just been put in charge of deploying NetAIOps in your organization, and you don't know where to start. Do you just take the statement of work and bill of materials that you were sent, or do you need to get a little bit more information before you're ready to spend a lot of money? In this episode of the Tech Field Day podcast, NetAIOps has its challenges. Welcome to the Tech Field Day podcast, where we bring together a group of IT technical experts to discuss a single idea about key concepts in the industry. This podcast features a variety of perspectives from members of the Tech Field Day delegate community and is often associated with one of our events. Tech Field Day is a part of the Futurum Group. This podcast is also published on our sister company's site at TechStrong TV. On this episode, as we head into Networking Field Day, we will be discussing the role of NetAIOps in your enterprise. But before we get into that discussion, let's meet who's on the panel today, starting with Rita.
Hi, I'm Rita Younger. I am practice lead for data center networking at WWT.
I'm Pete Welcher. I am a longtime networker, fan of technology, start early CCIE and taught various subjects and just expanded my knowledge base from there.
Hey folks, Jonathan Davis or JD here. I am a senior wireless and wired network engineer with Eastern Datacom.
All right. And of course, I'm Tom Hollingsworth. I'm an event lead here at Tech Field Day, specializing in all things networking. Let's jump into the premise for today's episode. AI is the solution to all of our problems, whether it's one we actually have or one we're not sure that we have. And it's going to make operations so much easier. Just install it into your network and everything goes so smashingly well. But there are challenges associated with NetAIOps. And if you're not asking the right questions, you probably won't understand what roadblocks you're about to run into. In this episode of the Tech Field Day podcast, NetAIOps has its challenges. I kind of want to open this up to all of our guests today to kind of maybe throw out one idea that you have that creates challenges for companies that are looking to deploy NetAIOps. Because we've seen this before, right, with SecOps and DevOps and DevSecOps and Ops DevSec and every combination of words that you can think of there. We've taken some of the other words in Ops and Net and AI and dev and all those things. But maybe, Pete, I'll start with you. What's one of the challenges that you see when it comes to throwing NetAIOps into the real world today?
It's similar to the automation space. You're talking big software. Big software takes installation. It has to be integrated. It has to get data sources, and it has to be maintained. So there's a lot of knowledge there, and all of that translates into cost. And that's where maybe organizations fit into different cost tiers. What can you afford? Can you actually afford this? Whether it's somebody in-house doing it with open source or a paid product.
That's honestly true. One of the things that I've noticed recently is the number of companies that are offering multiple licensing tiers based on the amount of data that the data lake has to ingest in order to be able to do operations on it. Anyone who's gone out and bought something like, I don't know, Cisco Splunk knows that there's workload licensing. And then there's ingestion licensing. And the question is, are you more worried about how many workloads you've got, or are you about to send this thing gigabytes worth of traffic on a monthly basis that you're maybe not prepared to pay for?
I asked Kentek about their pricing model, by the way, and that came up.
Well, and the thing is it's in a lot of cases, it's not a matter of whether or not the company is trying to charge you to ingest the data. It's that the company has to pay to store that data too, especially if it's a service or organization, because Amazon Cloud Storage is not free. And in a lot of cases, it is cheap enough. But when you're looking at the scale of gigs or terabytes or even higher than that, it can be a huge component to the cost of the service that you're offering.
And some of the power of NetAI Ops is going to be the application side where you're getting application performance statistics. Although deploying that one application at a time for 1,000 applications could be a ongoing fun consulting task.
Oh yeah, this is not just a group of raw syslogs anymore. This is heavyweight data that needs to be munged and crunched and dealt with. And when you create the analysis on top of that, you're just adding more data onto the pile. And again, that has to be stored somewhere. And if you want it to be retrieved in a reasonable amount of time, that requires expensive storage tiers. And that somebody's got to pay for that somewhere, right?
Well, and I think the other aspect here that we kind of have to address while we're thinking about this amount of data that we're uploading and we're analyzing to make these decisions, ideally, is it's ultimately based on this idea of an idealized network. And most of us don't have that idealized network. We have problems, we have issues within the network, and in a perfect world, NetAIOps helps us find those and helps us resolve those. But if we're running a less idealized network, if we're running a network that barely meets maybe the definition for a designed network, much less a well-designed network, the amount of noise, just like the issues we had with syslog or SNMP or anything else, the noise floor comes up. And then once again, we're running into now we're paying a lot for all of that data that we're ingesting and analyzing, but two, the quality of the data coming out, starts to decrease as well, right? Pete, I think I love you put out a set of posts that basically were around how do we take syslog data, how do we ingest that locally before we then upload that to our cloud solution. But again, one of the benefits that comes out of that is now we are decreasing that noise floor to ensure that the data we get out is more usable. I think without doing that and without having that appropriately designed network, you're essentially paying for a lot of confusion.
Some of the customers I deal with, particularly in the financial vertical as well as public sector, they don't want to use the cloud or cannot use the cloud for various reasons. And therefore, they have to have everything on prem. These huge data lakes, the capabilities all on prem. That is incredibly expensive. Yet at the same time, it's also a very exciting time when we hear about what Juniper's doing with Marvis and Cisco with AI Canvas. So some of these kind of packaged solutions rather than build your own, I think are going to be very appealing. It's just where are we really at? Like AI Canvas is currently alpha. When are we actually going to get to these solutions? But eventually, I expect to see self healing and even self driving data center networks in particular.
You just triggered a thought, which is, let's say, AI assisted deployment. Because what I'm sitting here thinking, some large customers that will remain nameless, with thousands of routers and a tech staff that was pretty darn sloppy about documenting anything. We, we did a project and kept finding devices that were ancient and they thought they'd modernized everything, for example. And so that's a case where I'm not sure anybody's really thinking about it, but part of the software might actually be detecting cleanup tasks. How do you make your network more robust? Yeah.
Well, I think one of the challenges that Rita pointed out is the fact that a lot of these solutions are kind of in progress right now, and they need our data in order to work for us. So the question then becomes, I think of this as like the box problem, right? Like I have the perfect box that I'm saving over here in the corner because one day I'm going to need to use that box. But until that day comes, that box is taking up space and it's not useful at all. And, in the case of like, what if it was in a storage unit where I'm paying to have that box in that storage unit until the day when I need it? Is there a point where I have to cut my losses and say, I'm just going to stop storing all of this extra data because eventually will come a day, but we're not anywhere close to that anytime soon. So I need to reclaim what I can because, there's an opportunity cost for everything.
Well, what Pete mentioned about customers don't know what they have, what they're using, they're typically very horrible at documentation for the most part. So being able to have these AI ops solutions handle some of that documentation, maybe we can reclaim some storage space, maybe we can reclaim some space or know what needs to be refreshed. But with that said, any of those older devices may not be able to have the telemetry available that we would need for AI ops. So it's kind of a catch 22 there.
Right. And, we've heard time and again how we can use syslog or we could use NetFlow, but there are better options out there. And I think of the people who are like, yeah, but I'm still driving an 89 Firebird and I'd love to have all of these cool new options in my car, but I can't because I'm still driving an old car and I'm not going to upgrade anytime soon. So a lot of this is kind of founded on the idea that you're going to need to upgrade. And I feel like some companies are using that as kind of a lever to push an upgrade cycle is, oh, yeah, we'd love to give you all of this additional information through software, but not with the hardware that you've got. You just need to go out and write a much bigger check, and the world will be a better place when you do.
Did you say you managed to say all that without saying the word telemetry?
You're right, because who knows if telemetry is going to be the thing that takes off in this. I mean, we've talked about it for years, right? But I still don't know that everyone is sold on that. I mean, people are still configuring an SNMP on things, right?
Well, SNMP has one advantage, which is it's kind of standardized, sort of, with extensions, whereas telemetry, it's every vendor for themselves. So you buy into a new vendor, and you've got a whole this adventure to look forward to.
Yeah, exactly. JD, maybe I'll turn to you. What's a challenge in NetAIOps that you think is, something that people might not understand or maybe they're not prepared for?
Well, outside of just the quality of the data that's being um, that's being uploaded, I think there's also a level of experience that needs to be present to understand when the model is hallucinating, right? Because there's absolutely been those situations where maybe the data and the model is saying, "Hey, this is the problem," and of course the issue with that is we make early decisions with a implicit trust, right? We go, okay, if that's the problem, I'm going to go solve that problem, rather than let me confirm that that's the problem. Let me verify that the data supports that's the problem, and we can spend a lot of time essentially, chase in the proverbial wild goose chase, only to come back around later on and realize either A, maybe that's just noise in the data, maybe that there isn't a problem that exists, or maybe that problem exists somewhere else, and there's another solution that might only take a few minutes to solve, but we never actually get there because we've kind of taken the answer that's been offered to us because it's easy. I think that's the concern I have. It's something I've seen, in the real world a few times, and it goes back to just like using, any LLM or anything anywhere else within AI, you do have to be aware that hallucination exists, and what is offered to you may not be the right answer. So I think this idea of we can let level one people make level three decisions with the help of AI, that's not the reality.
So if AI says it's not DNS, we should not believe it. It's always DNS.
But
it's always DNS.
But I think that the challenge there is, I like to call it the WebMD problem, right? Is you plug all your symptoms into WebMD and it comes back and it's like, oh, you have cancer. You have pancreatitis. Right. You have this extremely rare disease that's only ever been seen in 4 people, but your symptoms match perfectly. And me as a person would look at it and go, well, obviously it's smarter than me, so it must know. When I go to the doctor's like, yeah, there's no chance that you have that. It's actually this other thing over here that WebMD always misdiagnoses or something like that. There does need to be a little bit of institutional knowledge involved there. But the problem is that the way that people are selling me on AI has all the institutional knowledge that I could ever need, so I can just get rid of those people. And that wouldn't affect a cloud provider having DNS deployment problems, right? As we record this at the end of October after watching 2 major cloud outages in 2 weeks.
I don't think that's really the issue, Tom. The way I look at it is when we're looking at, and I'm talking about vendor specific solutions, so that would be, Nexus Dashboard Insights right now, and in the future, AI Canvas, Marvis. When we look at those solutions, those are based upon information that those particular OEMs have had and collected over the years, and it's specific to their infrastructure. And they also have the ability to do pre-change analysis and post-change analysis. So you're not just trusting. I mean, you still need somebody who's a highly experienced engineer to be reviewing this. But I think there's strong possibility for really providing a better day two experience when you consider that, the purchase of the hardware is one thing, but that is nothing compared to day two, running that infrastructure over the next 5+ years. That's the real expense.
I think to your point, Rita, I think there is something to be said for that. Uh, pattern recognition. We know pattern recognition happens to be one of those things that AI generally does very, very well, right? And in my previous role, one of the stories that I both heard a lot and talked about a lot was this idea of a very large organization with hundreds of thousands of devices they essentially turned on that solution, and pretty much the very next day it came back and said, "Hey, by the way, here's 10, I forget the exact number, but here's 10 misconfigured links," right? Because it is very good at pattern recognition, and it was very easy for it to say, based on what we see across hundreds of thousands of these links, here's 10 that are outliers, right? And ultimately, that does solve a problem. Ultimately, that fixed a problem for that organization that it would have taken hundreds of hours to ultimately find that if they just simply said, "We have to go do this thing," right? Um, so I think there's value in it. But I think maybe some of the negativity that we're kind of presenting here is there's often this overpromise and underdeliver, where I think if we could flip that, where we underpromise and overdeliver, I think that would be the better way to handle this. But of course, that's not what pays for marketing and R&D and all of the other things that go, that go into building these products. But I think there is something to be said for that. There are a lot of things that we can identify, these patterns that we can identify, and that are useful in the environments. And I think often we want to talk about the really high level stuff, and we don't want to talk about those simple time saving things that make impacts.
Well, there's some products out there that do some marvelous things. I'd like to see a checklist from each vendor of the things that their AI can detect and help you troubleshoot. Um, Thinking Mist here or Cisco's some of Cisco's efforts at troubleshoot on AI assisted troubleshooting. But I think no vendor is going to publish that list because it gives their competitor vital information.
That's absolutely right. June 2025 is when AI Canvas was announced. I have major companies looking for it. And guess what? It's alpha. So it's going to be a little bit. So I have to agree with JD that, we're overpromising. We're talking about products that are still in the early development cycles, and customers get really excited. I have another customer, very, very large financial, that gave me a laundry list of everything they wanted a product to do. And I'm like, well, we can look at, because they are a Cisco customer. I'm like, well, you can have Nexus Dashboard can do 80%. It can't do the other 20%. Um, but they're talking about growing their own, building their own. Well, but would that be the better route to go? Or should we wait for AI Canvas and see if it does the other 20%? So knowing what is coming and having that roadmap far out is very important.
You triggered a neuron. I was helping a large company evaluate network management products that had way too many. And it wasn't clear that those beginning with the letters HP were actually solving any real problems. So I tried to get them to list what was important to them and couldn't get any participation to speak of. How are you going to evaluate products if you don't even know what's important to you?
Yeah, yeah, that brings up a whole another kind of slightly off topic, the whole HP Juniper merge. where's that going to win out when it comes to the NetAIOps? Is it Marvis? Is there, what's it going to be? Blue Lake?
Yeah, I would never make a guess on that one. I do know that there is one product that's shipping with AI and has been shipping for many years, and then there's another product that's been promising to ship for this version for 3 years and still hasn't shipped, and still can't be deployed to customers. So I would make a guess there, but it would purely be a guess. But I do think I think that that really does resonate on the issue that we're talking about here, where if we start making promises that aren't deliverable within a reasonable amount of window, from a time perspective, by the time the promise is delivered, customers and prospective customers have an assumption that, well, that's been talked about for so long, everyone's got to be doing that, right? And it's really hard to begin. It's hard, one, to go in and have that conversation with them and go, "This is why it's important, and this is why it matters. And oh, by the way, yeah, it's been talked about for 18 months, but yeah, no one's actually doing this yet." It's hard to have that conversation, but it's also hard for the customer to know what is what is out there in that matrix that they can check the box on. What's in the matrix that goes, okay, in this list of product features, these are the things that matter to me because these are the things I can buy today. And I think most customers don't actually have a good handle on that.
So I want to give Rita a chance to bring up one of her challenges with Net AI Ops, having heard, what we've seen so far. Rita, what's something you think people should be concerned about?
People should be concerned about what is really available today, as we've kind of discussed. Um, there are multi-vendor environments out there. So consider, is a OEM specific solution going to provide for both campus as well as network and wireless? So data center, wireless, and networking in a multi-vendor environment. Um, I'm not seeing that as of yet. So I think that's a big concern.
And you're absolutely right, but look at what the lead is on that. Because if you look on the other side of the fence in the AI market, you've got companies like NVIDIA who have a completely vertically integrated stack, right? You order NVIDIA servers running NVIDIA Spectrum X or InfiniBand and NVLink, and everything just works because it's all one company. And why would you ever want to integrate anything else with this? Because ours is so much better. And then that becomes the blueprint, right? Well, we have Ultra Ethernet out there as an option. Companies want to kind of push their own flavor of it, and they want people to do that. And that becomes an operational nightmare because, we can barely get OSPF to talk to itself across different vendors' gear. And OSPF has been a standard for 20 something years now. And we're kind of on the forefront of things. And if you thought protocol development and prototyping was, fast in the old days, we're looking at things like model context protocol, which is they're not less than a year at this point. And everybody is just on top of it saying, oh, this is the way that we're going to do this. And this is how everything's going to operate. And I remember when APIs were the way that people wanted to do that. And that's a developer side of the fence. We're not even talking about the operational side of the protocols where people are like, well, why are these two things not talking to each other? And how am I going to get them to work? And why do I get rich statistics from this side of my network and, the bare bones from over here? When you go to the company and say, I need this to work together, what's their response? Are they going to say, yeah, we'll bend over backwards to work with you because you're one of our most valued customers? Or are they going to say, well, for what it would cost us to develop that solution, you can just go buy some more hardware?
Well, when it comes to NVIDIA and Cisco are partnered now. So we're integrating the GPUs inside the Cisco servers for the AI pods. So having that integration happening at the OEM level, I think is really, really valuable, really important. I agree with you. If it were my data center, I would not be mixing different OEMs in the data centers, but you do see in some um, in some environments, you'll see one data center might be Arista and one data center might be Cisco. Um, I personally wouldn't do it. It's too much of a management challenge, like you said, working with different vendors. You also see companies that are migrating. So they might be migrating from Arista to Cisco or to Juniper. And so in that migration process, they do have multiple OEMs, could be even in the same data center. So yes, it's not ideal, but we see it every day.
And I thought I saw some stats that the Ultra Ethernet future seemed to be attracting more buyers recently than the NVIDIA proprietary technology.
But all standards have that, right? When the new standard comes out, people are going to want to adopt it and build around it. And then when the next leap comes out, then they're going to want to flock over there because, 15% in performance increase could mean the difference between paying a huge cloud bill this month and paying a slightly smaller huge cloud bill this month.
And Pete, if you're talking about InfiniBand versus Ethernet, even traditional Ethernet, 400, 800 gig Ethernet, you're going to see performance unless it's absolutely the biggest AI environments. Your GPU to GPU traffic, Ethernet. Meta's done plenty of testing on that where Ethernet has just as good performance. So I don't think we need to stick with the one-offs anymore. We can go Ethernet and then ultimately Ultra Ethernet.
I think that's why we're seeing the big uptake on the Ultra Ethernet is it's multi-vendor.
As you can see, there are a lot of questions that are brought up when you start talking about the world future of NetAIOps. You have to know the costs that are associated with it. What is it going to cost you in order to be able to deploy it? You have to understand whether or not someone in the room is smart enough to understand when what it's telling you isn't going to jive with everything. And then, of course, no network out there is completely greenfield or completely single vendor. And if you don't have an understanding of how to interact with all the various parts of your network with a solution that knows how to talk to them all, you could find yourself with less information than you started out with. That will just about do it for this episode of the Tech Field Day podcast. We want to thank you all for listening in. If you enjoyed this discussion, please subscribe on our YouTube channel or your favorite podcast application. We don't want you to miss any of our episodes. And if you do subscribe, leave us a rating and a review so everybody out here knows what we're all about. This podcast is brought to you by Tech Field Day, the home for IT experts from across the enterprise. It is a part of the Futurum Group. For more upcoming events and additional episodes, head over to techfieldday.com/podcast or check us out on TechStrong TV, including the TechStrong TV over-the-top application. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next week.